Hello and welcome to Franchising Uncut. I'm Bruce McFarlane, CEO of BDC Partners. After the success of our Tell Us Your Effing Story franchising series, where we interviewed some amazing franchisors last year, we decided to change the format a little bit this year and dive into some of the big issues in franchising in a little more detail. Today I'm here with my business partners and former franchisors, John Sully and David Lindsay. Welcome, gents.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
you.
Bruce. Lovely to see you.
And so, John, first question for the year, where did your hair go? Were you feeling left out as part of the team?
I got a memo that said there was a bald convention going on and I had to do something about that. So I got my 16-year-old son to shave my head and he was actually gagging when he was doing it, which made me feel fantastic.
I do have one important question. Did you go with the mohawk look before you?
I had tufts, little tufts everywhere. It was very cool.
Well, welcome to the club.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
So, John, over the break, when you're on holidays, you decided to jump on LinkedIn and just rant, as you normally do. But one of your posts on LinkedIn did generate lots of conversation, which was fantastic. Lots of conversation from franchisors from all around the world. Interestingly, people were commenting from all over the place.
Yeah.
So what we decided to do, the three of us, is to go, well, let's move some of these discussions we were having about some of the issues and challenges in franchising from our boardroom table and from over the phone on our calls to a new series as part of our podcast series. So initially, Franchising Uncut, pretty crap name. So we're going to come up with a different name. So, something... I'm not the creative one of the group, so Dave, maybe
F and Uncut.
Oh, F and Uncut. So we want to hear from people about what topics they want to hear from. So if you're watching this now, shoot through a topic if there's something you want to get into. But today, the first topic was what's wrong with franchising. You were talking about how is franchising broken? What are the some of the challenges? And so, what prompted you to write a post about franchising? It's dying and it's over.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one because the over Christmas, as a bit of backstory, we had our old au pair babysitter come out from Germany, and she bought some presents, but she also bought COVID. So we were, which was very nice of her, but we were basically in lockdown for 2.5 weeks, and it just it gave me a bit of a chance to sort of have a think about the last year and what we'd been working on and what we'd been doing. And I sort of felt, it felt hollow. I love franchising. It's a great way for people to get in and take their own step and start a business. And you've got you've got safety blankets. You should have, guide rails around, all that sort of stuff. And I just felt like some of the companies that I've seen and that we've seen, it just lost its way. And it had gone from when we were growing businesses, and Michelle's in particular, it was about making the franchisee money. And now it's just about, it seems to be, not all the same, it's a generalist comment, but they are looking at how they can gouge as much money out of every facet of the dollar flow throughout these systems. And we're just missing the mark. And it pissed me off, to be honest, because it's can and is giving franchising a bad name when it shouldn't. They should have no right to do that.
It's providing a lot of content for the people who like to shit on it.
Yeah, well, that's right, exactly, and that's the shame, and that's what why I wrote that, because I just wanted to say as a check to everyone, look, just stop. There's so many systems. We always talk about, when you get to that 24 stores,
critical mass,
that's when it stops. And I think it stops because for the X factor is always the founder in many cases, and they're getting new people into the system to do the work and blah blah blah, all that sort of standard stuff. But I think it also fails at that point because, particularly recently, that the money is not there. The return to the franchisee is not there. So they're getting there and they're going, well, hold on a minute, I'm not fucking making any money here. The franchisor is, but I'm not like what it used to be. So
do you think that was that So it's not just a factor of interest rates went up 13 times last year or whatever it was, and so cost of living went up. So the franchisees' expenses were going up. Do you think it's more broader, bigger issue that it's been coming for a while because franchisors, the way that they're charging the franchisees for all the different parts?
100%.
It's like, a franchisor who's getting rebates on a product in cost of good. They're getting rebates on a product that they actually don't outlay to supply their franchisees. It's the supplier going straight to the franchisees, but then they're getting a lick. Now, do you know how much a franchisee can become profitable just by giving that allocation? Even if the supplier's happy to give that rebate, why not put that rebate into a marketing fund that's going to generate more customers for the franchisee, and get the franchisors focused on working for their royalty percentage as opposed to how can I lick a couple of bits and pieces here.
Yeah.
Because it's the franchisee, like I've always said, nothing sells franchises better than profitable franchisees.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So if you're talking, let's dive into the profitability thing a bit. So, do you think that the franchisors have got a good sense of how their franchisees are going? When we're talking, obviously that's from large to small, but it just seems in my experience, particularly the smaller ones, whilst they have clauses in their franchise agreements, they'll have software available to do it. They don't necessarily have either the resources or they're not investing the time into understanding their franchisees' P&Ls, so they don't really know what's going on.
I also think it's the people who's helping setting up their franchise systems, who they're
right back to the very start.
Right back to the very start. Who are they surrounding themselves around? Like, geez, Bruce, we've gone and taken a look at numerous businesses that have come to us to franchise, and because we go into such a financial element of the setup, the unit economics, is this thing going to be profitable for them? And we've said no to businesses looking to franchise. And what's heartbreaking is, that they're not going to make it, and then you go to an FCA event, and you see they're at the event with a franchise business.
And the model didn't stack up.
And the model never stuck up from a financial point of view. Like, you're sitting there scratching your head going, okay, well, let's pull this all the way back. Are we doing the correct due diligence, financial due diligence on whether this is a franchisable business or not? Is there enough margin in it for franchisees to get a return? What's the overall investment? Are they going to get a salary out of it? Like, it all starts in the roots, how these systems are being set up from the get-go.
Yeah. So new systems, obviously, that's, you're a startup or an emerging, you're pretty close to when that all started, but there's some of the established systems that have been around for a long time.
Correct.
And maybe their business model hasn't evolved, and so it's not necessarily profitable anymore because supply costs have gone up a lot. Labour, rent, all the things that have gone up. So, what are your thoughts on what a franchisor was doing to reassess their model? Because that's a pretty scary task to undergo, to actually go back and remodel it. Have you seen?
The only thing that I've seen is a sales or price increase.
Yeah,
that's it. That's just polishing a turd, basically. Yeah. So. That they need to go revisit all that entire process, and it could very well be that the model is now flawed, and it could be all over. Generally, it shouldn't be, but going back and revisiting if there's suppliers, third party suppliers, what they're doing, and the price that they're delivering their product at. It could be an overseas thing. It could be when you're looking at the initial investment of, if you're costing $500,000, you go overseas and you can deliver it for $400,000 if it's a shop fit, if it's bricks and mortar. So return on investments, which is what it's all about, is absolutely critical. Can I just jump on one thing that you were saying? Even at the start, every time we've looked at a franchise system, is that you have some that are a light touch and you have some that are a heavy touch. Yeah. So I would say McDonald's is a heavy touch. They control
7-Eleven.
Everything. 7-Eleven, all that sort of stuff. I love that shit. I think I'm a communist at heart, to be honest, but I love that stuff because you buy into a system with people that were police officers, they were farmers, they were accountants, whatever. They don't know how to fucking run a business or deliver numbers. A lot of these franchisees that I've dealt with over the years don't even know the difference between GP and cost of goods.
Correct.
They just don't get it. And even though you walk them through it, well over and over and over again.
Margin and markup.
Exactly.
know the difference.
That's exactly right. So I'm a full believer that the franchisor should have intimate financial knowledge of every franchise that they have in their system, because the amount, and you would have gone through the same thing, the amount of times that you see someone that's got their own personal problems, whether it's they're going through a marriage breakup, or their mum and dad are sick, or they've got alcoholic, or their kids are sick, or whatever, and the eye just gets off the ball.
Off the numbers,
Yeah. And you need to know that sooner rather than later. And you go and have a meeting with them, and then you get a call from the landlord that says they haven't paid their rent for 6 months.
Or tax.
Or the tax, exactly.
Super.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
Like, what?
Yeah.
So it's a killer. You need to have full visual of that, or else you're just fucking around, to be honest.
But at the end of the day, you're bringing it back to you're buying a system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how many, since coming from the franchisor side of the fence to the supplier side of the fence, and it's amazing to see how many brands actually don't have benchmarks as a very, very simple metric to say, and empowering your field managers instead of having them going in there to go, oh, you've got dirty windows, or you've got dust on your shelves, or whatever. Like, that's irrelevant. Well, you've got to make sure that the shop is
safety and compliance.
it's optics and all that shit.
Critical.
But at the end of the day, if you're not sitting down looking at what their bottom line is looking at, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's supposed to be a collaboration, and it's you hear it's all about collaboration, working together, and everything like that. But we stand off when it comes to financials.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously franchise fees are on top line, and so there's a lot of talk about sales, but there's often not a lot of talk about expenses.
Bottom
And so profitability. Because so do you think there's so it's just a matter of, it's a part of the conversation, it's helping educate, because given that you're based, depending on what system you're in, but often the franchisees are passionate about fitness or passionate about food or whatever it is.
Yeah, correct.
And so they love the product that they're in a franchise system for, but they don't necessarily have all the skills around it. So it's just it's making sure that financial knowledge is passed on.
Exactly, and they have the tools to understand it as well, because they, you can't teach passion. And if they're exactly like what you said, they love food or they love fitness, God knows I don't.
Walking dogs.
Yeah, walking dogs, exactly. But if you have that, then you've got it all. You can do everything else.
Yeah.
But you can't create passion.
No, and you can't train attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you got all that. So you got all those things, and that's why it's so disappointing when you've got these people that are passionate about walking dogs or fitness or whatever it is, and then they're not that great at running a business. But they've got into a franchise because if they had started it themselves, they probably would have gone broke a lot quicker than what they did.
It's like this whole idea. We don't want our franchisees too entrepreneurial, because then they'll go out and do their own things. But yet, when you're recruiting them and bringing them on, you're telling them, now let them go and look for a site. Now let them go and get this financial advice. Now, but we're not going to give them any financial information. And it's kind of like you're either one or the other. So what are we doing? Are we a franchise system that we can guide them through this and give them the guide rails? To your point,
But it's interesting what you say though, because if you're going to be we'll talk about the economics of the franchisor now. So if you're a franchisor and you've got 8 sites, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have a property guy and a field manager. You don't have you have the founder and 3 people, and they're trying to do all these things.
At best, it's a founder and someone.
Yeah, so it's just that challenge for that emerging franchisor, the startup franchisor, as they go through the start. The founder's probably finding the sites, the founder's managing the fit outs, the founder's doing like all of those things, which you both were involved in all those different parts. But I guess the economics of the franchisor, they don't have enough royalties to cover employing all these people. So I guess it's that balance between what you're doing yourself, what you're bringing a team in-house, and then what you're using external consultants to do, and who's paying for it all as part of the thing. So, I think that's a really important one, because the franchisor, if they're using external parties, well, are they managing the external parties? Or are they just telling the franchisee, off you go? So, I want to talk about a couple of them, but like supply chain's the one you've already touched on. So let's talk about supply chain for a minute. So you've been involved in a few different businesses. One of them, supply chain was the biggest issue you've talked to. So to talk about bad supply chain, party shop.
Yep.
But then other one, you're involved in a bakery, so you were managing that. So
and controlled it.
So why did it go wrong, and then what did you do right in the other one?
Well, I mean, the first one was right. The Michelle stuff was right because we controlled it and we made it. The biggest issue was really around staff. So we had recipes, we had raw materials, all that sort of stuff. So we were in complete control, and we could change the product to meet the time. So if it was seasonality and we started doing fruit friands or whatever the hell, or danishes that was the fruit at the time that was in season. You're making products like that.
Healthy products.
I would hope not. But then on the party shop side, we'd done a deal with the American company Amscan, and they had 1,000 or 900 Party City stores. So all of the fast moving goods, cards or games or whatever the hell they were, hats, party hats, all went to them. So we'd get it like 6 months, 8 months later, and the horse had bolted. So if there was a new movie out, it was gone and dusted by the time we got the product. So that was a massive lesson to me to be very careful in anything that you get involved in, that you have continuity and control of the supply of the products. So yeah.
What about you, mate?
Well, the thing is, because we used to bring in the salt machines.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing was fixing service and warranties and warranty issues, because we actually didn't have service personnel here. So
because they were from Europe, weren't they?
They were from Europe. So I used to have to do all of the servicing of the machines myself, and then we always carried spare equipment. So if something did break down, we always wanted we didn't want one machine down for 24 hours for our franchisees, so I always carried a piece of equipment to quickly whip in, whip out, send the other one back to Europe, get it fixed, and then get it brought back. So making sure your suppliers are pretty much, along with all the stakeholders in a franchise system, they all need to be shared in the vision of what you're trying to achieve, where you're going, how you're doing it, and they make it a priority to be toeing the line with you. It's crucial, absolutely
Where'd
crucial.
you get the salt?
Down in Cryo, there was a pharmaceutical grade salt down in Cryo.
Right.
Cheatham salts.
So another one.
Funny story out of that one.
Because then you sold it, you dodgy prick,
I
as table salt.
I had a Volkswagen Caddy, and I learned its payload one day by putting a full pallet of salt in the back of it coming up from Geelong. Oh. Jesus Christ! I think the axle scraped the whole the whole road the whole way up. It was quite funny, actually.
Well, another one that I think is an interesting one is around site selection and fit outs, and so we'll probably lump them both in together. So, being part of a system where the franchisor says, well, the franchisee knows the area, they'll be able to find their own site, and they'll know the local contractors, so they'll be able to get it fitted out because they'll know builders and they'll know all that. And that's great if your franchisee has any idea what they're doing about negotiating leases, talking to landlords, what sort of deals are in place, and then talking to builders and actually understanding, how that and having time to project manage, because often your franchisees have got another job, they're still working, so they're getting ready
to start servicing debt. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah, so trying to they want to get the site open as quickly as possible, but at the same time they're trying to manage all these things. So let's talk about that process. We'll start with you this time, Dave. How did that process, did that evolve in terms of finding
it evolved.
Site?
So eventually we used to make the franchisee do it.
Yep.
And then it got to the stage where we recognised that we weren't opening the locations
quickly.
We weren't opening them with a whole lot of collateral, a whole lot of outreach, a whole lot of following, brand awareness, clients ready to go, booked in. And when I done the assessment, all of the franchisees were doing was talking to builders, talking to designers, going to get fixtures and fittings, doing this, that and the other, when they should have been solely focused on activations in the local community. So that then, very simple fix. I then went, okay, well, I'm going to create a style guide, and I'm then going to align with builders, and this is our selection criteria. So I then would find a number of different sites and go and inspect them with the franchisee, and then we'd both sign them off together. From there, we had builders that were aligned to how we done it. So it was literally one day a box would show up and the entire place would get fit out. But the franchisee was solely focused on local area activations, and that's why our locations were starting, before I exited, our locations were opening up profitable.
So with all of that was the site selection. So I go right back. So you found the site with them?
Yes.
So the lease negotiations, you're assisting.
Well, I knew the drivers.
Yeah.
So if you take a look at these guys have been customers with you. Like 90% of my franchisees at the time, I believe, were customers of ours. So they actually didn't know the main cry, and they weren't thinking of little things like, is there lights on the street for security reasons? You know, predominantly most of our employees in our centres were female. Did they feel comfortable locking up on a winter's night if there was lighting? Is there a car park out the back? What sort of security is there out there? Do you know, is there a step? A lot of our customers had emphysema. Is there a step up into the shop? Like little things like that if this is your first time looking for a site, you would never even think of.
Yeah.
You'd never even think of it in a million days. So, like, what's the parking allocation? Do you know, is there only 4 car parks out the front when we've got a capacity of 20 people? Like, is there only 4 car parks for an hour or half an hour? What is it?
Yep.
These are key little criteria. Has the switchboard been upgraded? Because that could be a massive price allocation.
Well, I was going to dive into, before I get to you, but just about the cost of these things, because obviously there's a big variation between a shopping centre compared to a strip shop, or a new building compared to an established building, or, you know, all those sorts of things. And so you might say it cost you whatever. What was the Salts of the Earth to open? 250, 300?
I think they were about 250.
Yeah, so 250 to 300. But then if someone takes one that's, instead of being 150 square metres, is 250 square metres, it blows it out. And then, so how do you manage that? So what about you? Like, you know, you got 360 Michelle's patisseries over the journey. So are they all the same, or were they big and small?
I'm going to be a smart ass here. I love it when franchisors, they finally find a franchisee, and let's say that I'll use a police officer. Now, he's expected to go out and have knowledge about everything that Dave said about the site.
Foot traffic.
He's got to have knowledge of what his electrical bill will be when he's fitting it out. All of the costs around the construction. In the meantime, if it's food, he's got to go to the health department, do the health exam.
Oh, yeah, do you need a permit
for that? Do all that shit. Yeah, lodge all those forms. He's got to get finance from somewhere. He's got to get trained. He's still probably trying to do his job. He's just made a massive life decision about leaving his role that he's been for 20 or 30 years. And he's taking the punt that if it all goes to shit, he's going to lose a huge amount of money. And then he's got to go and work out what sort of taps he wants.
Yeah.
I mean, what the fuck is that? It really does irritate me so much. We're a little bit similar to Dave, that at the end, for Michelle's, we found the site, and it was a different time, so it was a bit easier to franchise at that point. It was a bit of a flurry, so I'm not being dismissive of how hard it can be to find a franchisee. But I would always find the site first, because for a franchisee to be able to see the site that you've selected,
it's tangible.
Yeah, you can picture it there.
Yeah.
You know it. So I would always do that way. It's difficult to manage the landlord relationship because they can't hold the site, because they've got to still try and release it because you haven't signed the lease. I'm very comfortable with the franchisees taking the lease. Got no dramas with that whatsoever. But that's all they do. Everything else, the franchisor and we at Michelle's did. They just got the keys. All they had to worry about was their training, getting their finance ready, and away they went. And dealing with the emotional side.
So the cost of the finance, so if you take the example, the 150, or you take a 250, you say, oh, there's a bigger site, the rent's about the same. Yeah. So you've got this bigger site. You go, oh, great, but my rent's about what you said. Yeah. But now I've got a 250 square metre site. So it's going to cost me
$400,000 fit out.
It's a $400,000 fit out. Yeah. So how do you manage? But you just said, no, our model is this size.
I just don't, for bricks and mortar franchising, I do not believe that any franchisee should just be sent out and going and finding the site.
Yeah, okay.
It should be, you're buying into a system, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And they're not expected to know that. And it is a delay. It's hard enough nowadays to find a franchisee, let alone giving them opportunities where they can change their mind or whatever. There's so many barriers to entry at the moment for bricks and mortar franchisees.
If you
Eliminate them.
If you take a look at the lending landscape now, like banks, they want to see a draft lease before they'll release funds. So you're going out and you're finding a franchisee. Now, nothing kills deals quicker than time. So if you go out and you find a franchisee and then it's like, well, we really can't sign this up until they find a site. But it could take so long to get a site, which is the right one for that business in that suburb. And if it takes too long, the franchisee is going to lose interest. So it's always important to have, do you have your development strategy right? Do you know where you're going? Do you have your territories mapped?
Yeah.
And who is it that's always looking for real estate in that? Because there's two commodities at play here. You've got a really good franchisee who's hot to trot, but we don't have a site. So why are we looking for one without looking for the other?
Yeah, I think we want the recruitment part. I want to keep separate, but I think, but in terms of sites, because the other thing is, it's for an emerging. You're a franchisor. You've got 8 sites. You don't, and you're based in Perth.
Yes.
So it's tricky because
that's the other challenge.
Yeah, the other challenge is you don't have the resources to fly
Correct.
someone down to Mount Eliza where we live. It's a long way away from Perth. So and I'd say, I know Mornington, I just want to be down on Main Street because that's where all the people are. But we can't, the model doesn't fit because it's too expensive to be on Main Street.
You touched on it before about one of the critical things, and none of us are naive enough to not say that when you're starting out, it is bloody hard as a franchisor with cash.
Yep.
You've got to do everything. You're the cook, the baker, the whatever. But when you're stacking up the model, you've got to remember, I don't think people know this as well as they should, that development costs you can recoup in the sale of a franchise. So if you are paying 10 grand to a property person or 15 to a recruitment person, you can claim that back as part of the development fund. Or development cost of that franchise, I should say. So when you're stacking it up, you've got to make sure you're including that in the ROI to say, okay, well, fit out cost is $250, my development cost is $25, my training cost is this, blah, 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 gets me to $400,000 in cost, and my ROI is 40%, whatever it is. You've got to stack that up. So, because when because you're 1 or 2 people usually at that point, you will outsource it to someone, and you should be able to afford to do that. So then you can focus on the stuff where you would be working in the stores or in the franchise or in the van with it. And
that's a really interesting point, because traditionally how it stacks up is that, and listen, I had 5 iterations of our franchise model until we really cracked the nut and went for it. We started bringing in those charges, but what we done is we balanced out our initial franchise fee to say, okay, well that's our kind of clip there for developing the IP and everything like that. But traditionally, what happens is unless you're a much larger franchise organization where you can absorb that development cost from the IFF or IIF initial franchise fee, most of the emerging brands, they take it out of that fee, and then all of a sudden they've got scraps to actually feed and try and grow from that, and they just can't run a profitable franchisor. So they've got to get very solid.
But don't you think that initial, what do you call it, initial franchise fee?
Yeah.
That should be a net fee.
It needs to be a net fee.
So it's net. Like, it's hard enough, and I'm certainly not saying this is right, but I've seen some franchise systems are selling stores and selling franchises to get the franchise fee just to survive.
Yes.
That's bloody hard, and you're in a pretty tough spot when you're doing that.
Well, that's what's happening in that race to critical mass.
Yeah,
that's what's happening.
So I think, the focus. I think the theme of all of that is that we need to focus on the success of the franchisee. So we need to make sure that the franchisee is profitable and they're getting a return on their investment.
And it starts from the beginning.
100%. Like it's like when you bring people without experience design, but they go, I want our locations to look like this. and all of a sudden it ramps up. Like, I've had a couple of pretty hard discussions with some of our clients lately where, you know, it's 800,000 buy-in or whatever, but the return has been really stretched out because they want their locations to look a certain way.
Yeah.
But hang on a second, what's the ROI for the franchisee? You can sell it, and you know, the answer was, well, let's stretch out the franchise fee, or the initial term. And it's like, well, hang on a second, do we downsize? What is it? Like, who is our typical customer? Are they online, offline?
But it's back. I'm going to wind it up now because I think, you know, the original point. It's about the success of the franchisee. So
Correct.
it's about making sure they're making a return. And if you're a new model, making sure that the unit economics stacks up. And if you're an old established model, revisit it because maybe it's not quite working anymore because all those things we talked about, all the rents are high.
I just finished by saying this one thing. Would you rather have a franchise chain that's 20 stores and you're making $1 million, or a franchise chain that is 100 stores and you're making $2 million? You know, you just... They're trying to, what I've seen, and this is why, getting back to your original question about the post, the franchisors are feathering their nest early.
Yes.
And then that is stifling the growth, the overall growth. So they're never going to get past that. They're never going to get to a $2 million or $10 million EBITDA because it just doesn't stack up.
And then you have to exit those underperformers from the start because you've been just grabbing the initial franchise fee.
Yeah.
Thank you. First edition, 2024.
It's my first interview without hair.
Okay. We would love to get feedback from anyone who's listening about future topics that we're doing. You know, love to hear from people. You know, text one of us for future topics. Thanks, gents.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.